Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon or good evening to some of you. Thank you for joining us today. I'll be sharing my screen now. So, as Felina mentioned, this tool is quite new. It's actually quite new, about only 2 years old, and we have been using it for a year now, and it's still in pre-testing phase. But we have seen some changes already, or things to improve. But I hope that this will be worthwhile for you as well as we share with you some information or some of the things we are doing in Bible societies in terms of looking at literacy and how to assess the need for a literacy intervention. So at UBS, we believe that literacy links Bible translation with Bible engagement. And we look at literacy as a bridge between the two, between Bible translation with Bible engagement. That's why it's important for us to see if there is a need for any literacy intervention with Bible engagement and or with Bible translation and Bible engagement activities. And so we developed this tool and we call it the Literacy Needs Assessment Tool, taking inspiration from the translation needs assessment that our translators are also doing in their Bible translation projects. And the LNA tool, as we call it, or Literacy Needs Assessment Tool, is a guided survey instrument with a tabulated questionnaire to help identify the need for a literacy intervention. It was developed by our team, the Global Literacy Team of the Bible Society, to assess Bible Society staff in terms of assessing the language they use in their Bible translation projects, as well as in upcoming Bible translation projects and newly translated Bibles, New Testament and portions. It looks like this. The form is actually an Excel sheet, and if you can see, it's quite dark. So one of the users from Bible Society turned it into lighter blue. And so I decided to change the color to make it like this. But before I proceed, before I give you the details of what the LNA tool is, may I ask, just for a little participation, you can place your answers in the chat box. What kinds of preparatory tools or research instruments have you used in your literacy projects or any work where you are involved in? You may place your answers in the chat box. And I'll share with you later on some of the tools that we're using in doing the literacy needs assessment. Anybody? I couldn't see actually the chat, but
Yeah, Sita, let me read out some of the responses so that you can, yeah, would that help?
sure.
Yeah. Annie wrote about questionnaires.
A questionnaire.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, Lumi also said
Other
questionnaires.
tools?
And then Willa Shikha from Sri Lanka says surveys, test. Deepak from Bangladesh Bible Society says baseline survey. Mm,
Okay.
yeah. And then Tara says EGRA, so the early grade reading assessment, which is to test the baseline abilities of students in school in terms of reading skills. But yeah. And then
Thank
Asha,
you.
yeah, says community, identify where the community, where the literacy is needed.
The community. Yes. So
Mm-mm.
later on, I will share with you, as Felina mentioned, some of the content here is new for even the Bible Society staff who are here with us. We haven't shared this with them yet. This is a new development in terms of how we can use the tool, the literacy needs assessment tool. And the process that may be used in doing the literacy assessment is first we begin by doing a desktop research just to get a feel of the information or the data that we can gather from the web. And then we conduct field research to validate the initial findings we can get from any database. And then we evaluate it with the help of a literacy specialist and maybe the team to review and do consultation in terms of the more ambiguous data that we can get from the community. And then the team validates or update it and revalidate the data they gathered from the community. And then we at the Bible Society Global team reevaluate the information that they have gathered, and then they can decide and plan whether they continue to do the research or they can proceed with planning for their literacy projects. So that's the process. And as I mentioned earlier, the tool looks like this. It has several parts. The top part is asking about the profile of the country, and then we have the language profile, and then the different projects in the language and some of the available materials in the language. And then we have thematic questions dealing with the community, the profile of the community, the language is used, as well as the domains of language use, and finally the capacity or the readiness of the Bible Society to implement a literacy project. And now let's look at one by one these different sections, beginning with the um, country profile, and then followed by the language profile, as well as the different projects and materials available in the particular language or in the language in focus. And by the way, the literacy needs assessment tool, we recommend to use this for every language that needs it. So it's not per project, but sometimes some projects may have 2 or 3 languages. And our recommendation is to use one tool or one to do a survey or to use the questionnaire in every language that a project is using or will be using in their literacy intervention. So for country profile, the questions, if we zoom the questionnaire, it looks like this. On the middle part is where they put the data that they can gather from the field. And then there's also a column for the recommended source. And for the country profile, our questions range from the name of the country, of course, the population, as well as the literacy rate. And we segregated them into children and adults, and male and female. And then there's also a question on the UBS literacy priority, but it will be the global staff who will give the priority number. And for some, it will be priority 1 if there is more than 50% um, who are still non-literate in the country, or about 10 million, I think, 10 million speakers. So it's priority 1 for us. For language profile, our questions range from the name of the language to the ISO code, as well as the user population in the country, and then the local literacy rate. And this is sometimes very difficult to get from the community or even from the database, but there will be some solutions to every problem, so they can actually provide numbers here or figures here that they can gather from the community, as well as the EGIDS level or the language status. And we also ask information about the different projects in the language in terms of different domains. So we have literacy, Bible translation, Bible engagement, audio projects, digital Bible text, as well as special projects, including HIV and trauma healing. So this is the information we can get here can either be from the partner organization or other organizations that are doing these interventions in different domains in the language, as well as um, past and present project from Bible societies. ISP number is or refers to the International Support Program for Bible societies. So they have a particular number for their past or present projects. We also ask questions about the available materials corresponding to the different domains. So if it's a literacy project, it's a text material, or maybe some audio materials as well, or some video materials. And then we also ask materials for other formats like the Braille for the people with visual disabilities and other domains, either by the Bible Society or by the partner organization. And then going now to the thematic questions, The first one, community profile, used to be um, questions on the learner, but we decided to call it now community profile because the questions actually focus on the context of the community. So we ask questions about the primary occupation or livelihood of the people in the community, the socio-political context, as well as religion and other questions. Religion is quite important for us in the Bible societies because we want to know who are we dealing with in terms of the audience, because we want to integrate Bible translation and Bible engagement in our literacy projects. And for language issues, we ask questions about the percentage of the local speakers who are literate in the same language, as well as the availability of primary education in what language is it? And then the medium of education in primary schools, the status of the orthography is also important. And another important or open-ended question is about the motivation of the Bible Society or any entity to use that particular language or the target language in literacy and learning. So they can give us different motivation or reasons for using this language. And same with the other questions earlier, we have also some guidelines on how to use this questionnaire. So the second column, going now to the next one, the capacity of or the domains of language use, we ask what languages are they using in different domains. And in the third column, it's actually for the guide on how to answer the questionnaire. So for this question, the only guide here is to identify the language for each domain. And the final section is about the capacity of the Bible Society or the readiness of the Bible Society to implement the literacy project. And it has, I believe, 12 questions. And this range from partnership to staffing, as well as to the availability of a literacy specialist who can work or potentially assist the Bible societies. If you know, Bible societies don't really have a pool of literacy specialists yet. There's only about three of us in UBS who assists around 40 projects globally, 11 of which are in Asia Pacific. And so we asked the presence of a literacy specialist to help in our Bibles in our projects in Bible societies. And some of you from SIL have been um, helping us in this capacity. So the questions are listed here as well. And then there's the second column are the guide on how to answer the questions. And then the third column is where they place their answers. And the fourth column is the recommended source. If they cannot find it in the database, they can check with their local source or with the Bible Society itself or in other resources that they can find in the language or in the country. So again, this is how it looks like. And now I'm going to give you some examples from the field which use or who use the literacy needs assessment tool. This particular example is actually from Pakistan. And the country profile, as you can see, it's priority one. Literacy is priority one for them, regardless of the language. Um, Sometimes, in terms of the literacy rate, UNESCO only provides the rates for adult, but for children, it's quite difficult to get it. But I'm quite impressed with Pakistan. They were able to gather some data for children. And I think what they did was to just use whatever they have in their communities or in the database as well from their country. So this is actually a bottleneck for most of the Bible societies who use the tool because it's difficult for them to gather information for literacy rate for children. For the language profile, if you notice, this is a national language or yes, this is a language used at the national level. The EGITS level is one. This is in Urdu, the national language of Pakistan. And they were also able to gather information for the literacy rate just for Urdu. So it's quite different with the literacy rate from the country. Um, for both children and adults. And so this is an important information for us in terms of deciding if a literacy need or a literacy intervention is needed for this particular language. But also, the project in Pakistan, which used this tool, actually has been going on for several years now. We just encourage them to use this tool because they haven't used any literacy needs assessment tool before they implemented the project in the past. And as I said earlier, the tool is only 2 years old. And even if the project is going on or has been done for several years already, we still encourage them to do the literacy needs assessment because there may be new information that they can use for improving their literacy projects. And for projects, these are several projects that are currently going on or has been done in different domains for Urdu in Pakistan. So there is a BBL as well as IFCBH project by another organization in Pakistan. And in terms of the materials in Urdu, these are some of the materials that are available in Urdu language. And interestingly, they have Braille, uh, the, the Bible in Braille by the German Bible Society in Urdu. And for the thematic questions, these are the information they have gathered. And if you notice, Pakistan and the Urdu community is predominantly Muslim or Islam, and only 2% are Christians. So how are we able to, or how they are they able to provide literacy using materials with Bible content is quite impressive actually in that context. And for the language issues and domains of language use, these are the information they have gathered. So Urdu rather, may be a second language for some of the learners in the literacy project. And so another kind of intervention should be needed for that particular audience. So this is how the literacy needs assessment tool has been helpful to the Pakistan Bible Society that is actually implementing a literacy project in the national language. And for the capacity or the readiness of the Bible Society to implement the project, it's interesting to note that we ask a question about partnership because the first question talks about any intervention, literacy intervention being done by the government or NGOs. They said that the government is trying to reach the non-literate in the country, but the question is, instead of doing literacy intervention, can you work with them? The answer is no. But when you go to the next question, or I think question 23, about partners or 24, they actually have 15 partners working with them in Pakistan. So the partners that work with Pakistan Bible Society in literacy are small organizations, local organizations that have been doing literacy also, and they partner together to do literacy in Urdu. And overall, the questionnaire looks like this. So there are sections that are actually not filled with answers. And that's where the literacy specialist comes and help them on how to gather the information. Another example, I will not give the details, but this is from Lao or from Laos, Lao PDR. Some of the sections here are not answered. So in the first um, implementation of this tool, they may not be able to gather the information they needed. But upon checking with a literacy specialist or with me, we are able to answer most of the questions here with the help of a literacy specialist and the people from the community. And then going back to the tool, this is now the new version coming from the different feedback from the Bible societies and some of the questions. The questions actually are basically the same. We just tried to make this more um, user friendly to them in terms of the formatting and as well as making the guidelines and the questionnaires clearer to the users. So the question now is how do we gather the information or the data for this questionnaire? And even if there are recommended source here, there are still possible creative ways to do this. And of course, the recommended ways to gather data is through first, as I said earlier, desktop research, either through search engines, databases, and of course, the more popular AI these days. And then we validate it through field research by doing interviews, questionnaires, and later on, I will share some practical tools using participatory approaches to um, engage the community in doing the literacy needs assessment. So going back to the first part of the tool, the country profile, the upper part of the tool, the first two sections that deals with country and the language situation, we have the different databases to look at. In terms of population, we use the World Factbook by CIA. We find it very informative and current, especially with the population of the country, as well as UNESCO Institute for Statistics and the World Bank data bank. Actually, the World Bank data bank gather information from UNESCO statistics or Institute for Statistics. And sometimes if people find it difficult to use the UIS, they can just go to the World Bank data bank and get the literacy rates. And of course, the ethnologue. But if information are not available in these databases, they can look at the national or local statistics offices and databases as well. In terms of the projects of the language, in the language and availability of materials in these languages or in the languages we're looking at, we have the Joshua Project and the Project Bible to look at for information as well. And of course, the local offices or the local Bible Society, if there are projects done in the past in terms of literacy or Bible translation or other domains. And for the other questions, the thematic questions, of course, we can use the Ethnologue and the Joshua Project for um, questions about religion and faith. And we also have the national and local statistics offices and databases for some of these questions as well. And now I'm going to share with you some participatory tools or methods that we can use in using the LNA tool um, in terms of addressing the issues or the questions we are asking in the literacy needs assessment. For community profile, what we can do is a community mapping. We can do this by making, for this is a dummy community, by the way. So we can, um, for example, draw a map of the community, and then we can gather several stakeholders around the map, and we ask them questions, we engage them, and then we can ask them to draw the different landmarks in the community. So for example, there is a rice field in the community. If there is a rice field, we can draw that. We can draw also, or we can also place the different residential areas as well as different offices, institutions, or even the marketplace. And perhaps we can also include the um, places of worship in the map. And then we can begin to ask questions using the questionnaire. So for example, for this community, it's a predominantly Christian community, and some of them are using the ethnic language or their home language in their residential areas. But there's also a dominant national language speakers in the community. And because some of them are probably commercial and office workers, but also some of them are working in the fields or in agriculture. But there's also a pocket of migrant Muslim minority in some sections of the community, and they use their minority language to um, engage within the community. So in doing this, we can engage the community. We can ask the community to provide us information based on their actual experience and actual situation and in their context, but also based on their perception. So it's a more clear and more realistic information we can gather from the community and not just looking at the databases for profiling the community. So this is one way to use or to engage the community in doing the literacy needs assessment in community profiling. And yeah, the national language is used in the schools. So From this information alone, we can see that the local language is not being used in education or in literacy. Looking at the next section, language issues, we can use several tools. Those of you who have been trained in participatory methods for engaging the communities, we can use the overlapping circles or the use of our languages in education and literacy, or literacy rather, and the use of our languages in ministry or in the church, as well as the bilingualism tool or the languages we use tool. So, for example, we can use the overlapping circles, the use of our languages in ministry or church, and we can have two circles here, two overlapping circles. The first circle, we can label it for the home language or the L1, and L2 in the second circle. And the middle part where it overlaps is where both languages are used in ministry or in the church. So we can engage the community by asking them to write several activities that they use the home language and they use the national language, and what activities are um, in which language are they using the two, I mean, the mother tongue, the home language, as well as the national language. So they can place it in the middle section of the overlap or the overlap. And we can notice that it's actually quite similar to a chart, but in this way, we engage the community in providing information for us. So the information is not just coming from the perception of the Bible Society, but from the community itself. And another example is for the domains of language use, we can use the same map, the use of our languages tool. This time it's for the domains of language use map, and there's also a domains of language use chart. But if we use the map, we can use the same map we used earlier to gather information for um, the profile of the community. But this time, we will look at the languages they used in different domains. So we can again gather the community around the map, and we can use several legends to mark the different languages they're using in different domains. So for example, in the ethnic language or the home language or L1, we can use red, the red marker, and green for the national language, yellow for the minority language, and purple for other languages. So for example, in the homes of this community, they use the home language or the ethnic language, and even in some border areas. Um, yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, there's a pocket of uh, migrant Muslim community. So the yellow marker refers to the language that they use in the homes as well as in the workplace. And in the border areas, we also need to identify in what language the people are using to communicate with other people um, in the borders of their communities. So for this particular example, the national language is used around the borders of the community. And so we can mark this map with the help of the community to identify the different languages they use in different domains using the markers that we can use. So from this example, we can engage the community in a more creative way. And in this way, they own the data, and it's more realistic and um, more current because it's the community itself answering or providing the information for us. So from this example, for schools and education, the three languages, or at least three languages, are being used: the mother tongue, the national language, and other languages, perhaps English. And in the church, you can notice in places of worship, there's red and green marker. So it's the home language and the national language, and yellow and purple for the Muslim community. So it's the home language of the minority speakers, yellow, and purple, perhaps Arabic, other languages for this matter. And we also have the same tool or a similar tool we can use to identify the languages in different domains, this time using a chart. So if we want to get the different languages or the different languages we use in the church or in ministry, we can have at least four markers marking the home language, the national language, both L1 and L2, as well as L2 and other languages in different activities in the church. So this is, for example, in fellowship and in singing, the community is using the home language, even in their official meetings and communion and Bible studies. But they also use the national language in singing and praise and worship, in praying, and in this time in Bible reading and in Bible studies and small groups, and of course in giving the sermon. And they use both languages in these activities. So if we can notice, what we can gather from this information is that the Bible is not yet printed in the mother tongue because they only read the Bible in the national language. And yeah, so that's one of the most outstanding information that we can gather from this particular example. So to do this, we can gather the community and we can ask them to list several activities that they do in the church or in their ministry, and then they can categorize these according to the languages they use. So this is another more easy way actually rather than the map. If the map, going back to the map, these are for more, I mean, the stakeholders that you're um, engaging here probably are still non-literate, so you can use the map. And for a more literate community, you can use the chart or whatever tool is more convenient for you or more appropriate for your context, then they can use whatever tool you can to gather information for the domains of language use. The next one is the capacity of the Bible Society to implement the literacy project. We can use several tools for this: appreciative inquiry, force field analysis, SWOT analysis, or the stakeholders network analysis. This is very new for some of you, but for those of you who have been trained in PMIC, you probably have used this tool in the past or have used this or are using this in your language projects. So I'll just give briefly the description of this tool and how you can use this for the context of assessing the needs of literacy in the community. So for appreciative inquiry, this allows the members of the community and even the teams, literacy teams, or even the organization to appreciate the good things as well as to share hopes about what might be possible or possibilities for the target language or in the literacy team or in the organization. And then they can decide what to do with the good things, or they can begin to make plans for some of those hopes to happen. So for example, the good things in the language are there's already a Bible in the language. There's a primer that have been done in the past. And there are some short Bible stories that are available, and there is a staff from the Bible Society who can do literacy. So those are some of the good things. So we focus on the good things, some of the resources that the Bible Society has or an organization has. And then we also ask questions about what are their hopes in terms of implementing the project, the literacy project. So they need funding. They probably need a language center or trained teachers and more books to use in their literacy projects. So we can use this, so we can gather this information and use it for planning. And another example is the force field analysis. It helps a group to identify the forces which will help them or hinder them in reaching their goals. So we have the helping forces as well as the hindering forces. So for example, in a particular community or a particular language community, they already have the language committee, they have funding agencies, and there are knowledgeable staff from the Bible Society or from a partner organization that can be helping forces for implementing a project. So how can they strengthen the helping forces and help them in implementing a project? And how can the organization or the group weaken the hindering forces or change those into becoming change the hindering forces into a helping one. So, for example, there's a strict language policy, which sometimes um, um, we encounter in some of our projects in Bible societies, and there's different orthographies available in that particular language. And of course, in some situations, there are fundamentalist groups that are really difficult to work with or a threat to our project. So the group can identify or even begin to plan and make ways on how to change these hindering forces into helping ones or to weaken them or to strengthen the helping forces. So force field analysis is a very participatory or very active, interactive tool to use in first in assessing the needs, but of course in planning as well. And another one is the more popular SWOT analysis, identifying the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it helps the group to analyze the internal forces as well as the external forces. So, for example, we have four quadrants here, and the first two quadrants on top deals with the strengths and the weaknesses of the language community or the organization. And the those two quadrants below are the opportunities and threats, and these are actually the external forces that we don't have a hold on in terms of implementation or in terms of doing literacy. So we can identify ways on how to use this information, the different characteristics that can influence each other. So we can still engage the community in this way by asking them to identify the strengths and the weaknesses, the opportunities and the threats in their language community or within a Bible society, because we're dealing with, or the question is asking about the capacity of the Bible society to implement a literacy project. And finally, we have the stakeholders network analysis, talking about partnerships and collaboration. We can identify other people who would have an influence or be affected by accomplishing a goal. So, for example, we have influential people in the community. Of course, we have government officials, pastors, or village leaders and funding agencies. We also have people or groups of people who can be strongly affected by a project, by a literacy intervention. Those are the community members, the non-literates, of course, and for our context in the Bible societies, the church. And those who are in favor of implementing a literacy project can be this group of people as well. But there are also people who are opposed to implementing a literacy project, and some of them are members or leaders of the community and perhaps some church leaders only want to use probably English in their church activities. So we can identify these and we can also use this particular tool to engage the community as well as the staff of the Bible Society and see if they're ready and they have the capacity to implement a literacy project. So these are some of the more participatory ways to engage the communities and the church, as well as the Bible Society staff, in identifying the needs of literacy and literacy intervention in their project. And if you have no training in using these tools, you can always approach SIL because they have a particular domain to train you, the participatory approach domain. For the Bible societies, I'm able to train you on how to use these tools as well. Should you want to use this in your literacy needs assessment of your language projects for your literacy intervention. So again, this is how the tool looks like and how to do it. The process is like this. So first, beginning with doing a desktop research and then conducting a field research to validate the information we gather initially from the web. And then we ask the literacy specialist in the community to evaluate the results we have gathered. And if there are discrepancies, we can update and revalidate it again in the community and then give it back to the Global Literacy Office for reevaluation. And then we can have recommendation if we need to do another cycle of the tool, the literacy needs assessment, or we can continue to planning already for the literacy project. So in the context of UBS, we require Bible societies, if they submit a literacy proposal, we require them to attach this because this is one of the information that the funding Bible societies need in order to provide grants for our Bible societies for a literacy project. And this is not just a literacy, this is not just a survey tool. This is also some way, another way of looking at research, initial or baseline research for our learners. So earlier, I think Tara mentioned about the EGRA. We can actually use that for the baseline research for our learners. I think there are questions about literacy needs, I mean, the literacy rate of the learners. So at UBS, we also have another um, document on like a guideline on assessing the needs of the learners. So for this one, this is just for to see if there is a need for literacy for a particular language. But then for assessing the learners, we also have another guideline which we are developing now for our Bible Society project. So thank you very much for your participation, and I hope yeah, this is useful for some of you.